Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to dive straight into the absolute ultimate retirement withdrawal debate. And to do this, we're looking at a pretty fascinating tale of two very different retirees. It's a story that completely challenges everything we've been told about how much of our hard-earned nest egg we can actually safely spend. Picture this for a second. We've got two people. Let's call them Robert and Susan. Both of them hit age 65. Both have saved up the exact same $1 million, and both decide, hey, I'm going to withdraw 7%, so 70 grand a year, to just enjoy the retirement I worked my whole life for. But fast forward 20 years, and their realities couldn't be more different. Robert, he ended up totally broke, scared, and having to move into his kid's spare room at 78. Susan, on the other hand, actually ended up with more money than she started with. Literally, the exact same starting balance, exact same withdrawal rate, completely different endings. So you gotta wonder, right? The crucial puzzle we need to solve right off the bat to secure your own financial future is this. What on earth was the single behavior that separated their paths? How did Susan thrive while Robert lost the whole shebang? Well, to solve this mystery, we actually need to rewind a bit. We have to go back to 1994. That's when a financial planner named Bill Bingen crunched the historical numbers on every single 30-year retirement window in modern history. He looked at brutal times, we're talking the Great Depression, the 1970s, and found that if you simply withdrew 4% of your savings in year one and adjusted for inflation, your money survived every historical 30-year economic scenario. And boom, just like that, the legendary 4% rule was born. But here is the secret almost nobody tells you. That rigid 4% rule, it was never meant to be the absolute limit. Even Benjamin himself later came out and stated that 4% was just a worst-case floor, definitely not a ceiling. In fact, in his 2025 book, he bumped his own recommended number up to 4.7%, pointing out that a lot of retirees could actually safely go even higher. Now, what's really interesting is how that floor concept opens the door to a very seductive pitch you see all over the internet. You'll see people online claiming you can confidently spend 7, maybe even 8% of your savings. And their logic sounds incredibly convincing. They argue, well, the stock market has historically averaged a 10 to 12% return over time. So if your money grows by 12% and you only pull out 8%, you're still 4% ahead. By that math, you double your retirement paycheck and your portfolio just grows forever. Honestly, who wouldn't want that? But hold on, because spending 7 or 8% based on that logic relies on one fatal assumption. It assumes the stock market just smoothly and predictably hands you that 12% return every single year, like clockwork, with zero interruptions. And as we all know, that is a complete fantasy. That is simply not how the real world works. The huge difference between an average return and the actual order those returns arrive in brings us right to the villain of our story. It's a concept called sequence of returns risk. And let me tell you, it is absolutely the single most dangerous blind spot in all of retirement planning. See, when you're working and saving, a market crash is great. It's a chance to buy cheap shares. But the exact second you retire and start withdrawing money, the math totally flips on its head. Let's break down this danger zone. Say you retire with $500,000 and the market drops 30% in your very first year. Ouch, you're down to 350 grand. But if you relentlessly pull out your fixed $40,000 for living expenses, that $40,000 isn't 8% anymore. It's now over 11% of your remaining balance. You're rapidly selling off your shares at rock-bottom prices, permanently locking in those losses. There are just fewer shares left to grow when the market finally bounces back. And you know what? That is exactly why Robert went broke. He retired right into a rough patch. The market fell hard in his first 2 years, but Robert did absolutely nothing differently. He just mechanically kept pulling his full 70 grand, adjusting for inflation, completely ignoring the market's freefall. He sold deep into the downturns, his balance plummeted, and by his late 70s, the math simply couldn't recover. Now, let's look back at Susan. She retired the exact same year as Robert, staring down the exact same rough start. But she survived, actually scratch that, she thrived because of one simple behavior change. During those first 2 down years, she temporarily reined it in. She still took a comfortable income, sure, but she skipped her inflation raise and cut back on the flexible, fun stuff until the market steadied. Once it recovered, she resumed normal spending. And during the boom years, she actually gave herself a raise. Over her whole retirement, she spent about the same total amount as Robert tried to, sometimes more, but she survived simply because she flexed. So this tale of two retirees reveals a massive core truth. A rigid set-it-and-forget-it 7% withdrawal rate for 30 years? Absolute disaster. But a flexible 7% target where you enjoy the good times and just trim back a bit during the bad, that allows you to safely enjoy your money. What Susan did wasn't just some lucky, spur-of-the-moment guess. It's actually a highly structured, proven strategy known in the financial world as dynamic withdrawals, or more commonly, guardrails. This is the real actionable answer for how you can responsibly spend more than the classic 4% without gambling away your future. All right, let's open up this playbook. There are 3 pretty simple rules you've got to follow to make this dynamic strategy work for your own portfolio. It's honestly much simpler than you might think. Step 1. You start higher, but you have to stay flexible. Instead of locking in a rigid number, you pick a rate you're totally comfortable adjusting. Based on Benjamin's updated research, a lot of folks can start around 5 to 5.5%. And get this, research from Morningstar shows that if you are genuinely willing to flex your spending, you can start withdrawing as high as 6% right out of the gate. You just have to be willing to move with the market. Step 2 is setting up your actual guardrails, picking a simple upper and lower boundary. Think of it kind of like bumpers on a bowling lane. If the market tanks and your portfolio shrinks, pushing your withdrawal rate past, say, 6% of your new balance, you hit the upper guardrail and you tighten the belt. But if the market booms, your portfolio grows, and your rate drops below 4%, you hit the lower guardrail, and hey, congratulations, you get to give yourself a raise. Now, to execute these guardrails without having a panic attack, there's one huge prerequisite. You have to know your budget inside and out in advance. You need to clearly separate your survival essentials, like housing and groceries, from your flexible extras, like vacations or eating out. That way, when you hit a rough patch, you aren't guessing what to cut. You just temporarily pause the flexible stuff for a year or so until things bounce back. And finally, step 3. This is how we completely neutralize that nasty sequence of returns risk we talked about earlier. The absolute danger zone is always those early years. So the rule is to protect your first 5 years by keeping 1 to 2 years worth of living expenses in a cash or short-term bond buffer. If the market drops, you just spend from the cash buffer, leaving your investments completely alone to recover. You're never forced to sell stocks at rock bottom. So, how do you know if you're personally ready to lean a bit more aggressive? Well, it comes down to your profile. If your basic survival bills are fully covered by other income, like Social Security or a pension, you have that cash buffer saved up, and you're truly willing to trim your fund money in a bad year, you can lean aggressive. Go ahead and aim closer to that 7% lifestyle. But if your portfolio has to cover literally everything, you have zero cash buffer, and you absolutely refuse to cut back, then yeah, you've got to stay conservative and stick much closer to the 4% rule. At the end of the day, understanding all of this boils down to one undeniable fact. Human behavior beats a magic math number every single time. It isn't about picking a permanent, rigid percentage, it's about adjusting to reality as it happens. Which leaves me with one final, pretty important question for you to chew on as you plan your own future. What withdrawal rate are you actually planning for? And based on what we've learned today about the power of flexibility, what's stopping you from safely spending just a little bit more to truly enjoy your best years?